There are a bunch of different careers that all work together to prevent wildfires. You might already be familiar with hand crews, hot shots, or hell attack crews, which are specially trained to use helicopters to fight wildfires. Now, these are people who work to put fires out once they've already gotten started. But let's talk a little bit about the people who work to prevent fires before they even get going. Beth, Mary, and Kara are all here to tell us about some of those jobs. Beth, you're a fire ecologist. Can you tell us a little bit about what that actually means?
Sure. As a fire ecologist, like Genesis explained, I look at the effects of fire on the natural world, whether it's trees, it's flowers, animals, insects, the air, and even effects on people. So I look at fire's role, where it should be, where it shouldn't be, how often it should be there. Um, and so when we talk about fires that shouldn't be there, we talk about wildfires because they're unplanned and may not be in the right place or the right time. And they can cause damage sometimes to the vegetation, the soils, to our waterways, and unfortunately, even to neighborhoods. So something else that I do as a big part of my job is I help plan prescribed fires. And you and Genesis talked about this as well. These are the good fires that you mentioned, because often fire managers intentionally set fires to burn up the debris that fuels a wildfire. So we're preventing wildfires. If a wildfire does start in that same area, there's not so much fuel to burn. And then firefighters can put what we tend to call bad fires out more easily. It's important to know also, always remember that when we, the fire professionals, start a prescribed fire, we only do it under weather conditions that allow us to predict the fire behavior so the fire does what we want it to do.
Interesting. And that all makes sense. So thanks, Beth. Mary, you're also a fire ecologist. Is there anything that you want to add about just that, about being a fire ecologist?
Well, everything Beth said is similar for me. I work in the Southwest in Arizona. We also have grasslands and forests. We have shrublands, which some people call chaparral, and we have desert. In our desert, if you think of the cartoon Roadrunner, you see those big cacti going by, the saguaro cactus. We have those as well. So some of our systems, and the desert is one, don't do well with fire, but pretty much everything else we have needs fire. Without the good fire, there's going to be more bad fire. So we depend on wildfire and prescribed fire to get us good effects, but we have to be very careful. When we put fire in the ground, sometimes for prescribed fire, even we will bring in hotshot crews and heliTAC to help us get the right kind of fire on the ground. My role as a fire ecologist is to help understand where fire is needed, when is a good time for us to put fire on the ground, and to help people understand what it is fire needs to do. If you think about your house or your classroom, if nobody came and cleaned it up, it would get kind of messy after a while. So one of the things fire does is kind of works like a janitor and cleans things up. That's a short version.
And what an interesting picture. I can see that. Getting rid of the fuels that we don't want sitting around all around the ground. All right. Now, Kara, it's your turn. You are a fire physicist. Now that sounds fancy and it's so fun to try to spell without the use of spell check. Can you tell us what a fire physicist does?
Absolutely. It's fun to say 3 times in a row as well, isn't it? So I study the fire, how that fire that Beth and Mary are working with moves around on the ground, right? How does the fire shaped, how does it interact with the particular fuels that we're talking about? How it might interact with the atmosphere and how that all feeds on itself to grow or shrink. What can we do to help control it in various ways? So you can think of me almost as an energy detective. I'm in there looking at how much energy is going into and coming out of the fire and exchanging between the fire and the atmosphere from one moment to the next.
Wow, I think I learned a little bit about the thermodynamic, the first law of thermodynamics in
Yeah.
college, and now you're explaining it to young people through the use of fire. All right, this is also fascinating. You all have such interesting work. I'm curious, how did you become interested in your particular job? Let's start with you, Beth.
I love what I do, but the truth is, when I was in high school, I knew nothing about fire ecology. As a matter of fact, I wanted to be a veterinarian. But when I got to college, my friends were studying forestry, and I really got interested in the natural world and started taking classes. Then my first job after college was in a national park, and there I learned that fire is part of the natural world. And like you guys talked about earlier, many plants and animals rely on fire to maintain their habitat. But of course, I also learned that fire can do a lot of damage if it happens at the wrong place or the wrong time, like Mary talked about. So that's why it's so important to know Smokey's 5 rules of fire prevention.
Got it. Thanks, Beth. Now, how about you, Mary? You all have the same job. Did you come into your career in the same way?
There are some similarities, but not quite. The first wildfire or any kind of fire that I saw on the land was when I was 7 years old, and I was on a vacation with my parents in Glacier National Park. I thought it was great fun to watch the air tankers come in, and I've always remembered that. But it was when I was in college as well, like Beth, when I first started to see fire as something that I could maybe do, and I got more and more interested. Beth, like you, I started with the Park Service and went from there to the Forest Service. I've worked in Iowa, South Dakota, New Mexico, Nebraska, and now I'm in Arizona as a fire ecologist. So I get to travel all over, and every year I learn more and I want to know more. So it's absolutely intriguing.
So fascinating. You've been all around the country doing this. That's great. All right. So how about you, Kara? How did you become interested in being a fire physicist?
Good question. So I started off just wanting to be a physicist at the age of 5. I was convinced that I was going to build the rocket that launched my younger brother into space. And we would run around our house for years. We tormented our parents with this idea that I was going to launch him into space and they would have to say goodbye. So we were totally dedicated to this vision. And then I got into high school and I was like, oh man, there's like even more cool things that you can do with physics than just launch rockets, which notably is quite cool. And I got into college and started taking classes in physics and became a physics major. I was also studying music at the time. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to be a musician? Do I want to be a physicist? They were both really fun. Went with physicist. Years later, I found myself in a job at the Missoula Fire Sciences Laboratory. I was just trying to try out different science jobs. Oh, I fell in love. It was awesome. Back to thermodynamics, Amchat, right? Like that's where it hit home. All that energy sleuthing came to pass. Plus, you're talking about like all this hot stuff that's splashing in with all this cold stuff. Super cool, right? Great fun. Now, the cool turn of events is I've pulled music and sound back into my work. So I now think about the sound of fire again and think about that music training as part of what I do every day.
Wow. And so you've been the conductor of the symphony of your career here. This is so fun. Thank you all for sharing. Now, of course, fire ecologists and fire physicists are not the only experts in fire science. I was lucky enough to catch up with Jessica Prince, who's a fire prevention technician. Now this is so important because she also helps prevent wildfires before they start. Let's take a look at what she has to say.
My name is Jessica Prince, and I'm a fire prevention technician on the Tahoe National Forest in Northern California. A fire prevention technician is someone who specializes in education, enforcement, and engineering, as well as fire suppression here on the forest. I feel our job is super important because we're able to preserve the lands that we serve and all the public that come here to visit. We're able to educate people anywhere from the Smokey Bear program to driving dispersed roads and educating campers and hikers, as well as our public that live here in the wildland-urban interface about defensible space and safe debris burning. I chose my career kind of in a funny way. I guess I just loved the outdoors, and as a teenager I thought I would get a job working on the recreation crew here locally in the town that I lived in. As I got a little bit older, I thought it'd be more fun to fight fire, and so I got trained to be a wildland firefighter and found love for the prevention program, and I've been there ever since. My favorite part about my position is the diversity. Every day is a new day. Not only do I get to do fire prevention and try to keep fires small, but getting to learn the roads and being able to do rapid response to initial attack fires, building relationships with our cooperators in our community, as well as doing emergency medical response. It's really a neat position to be able to give back to the public that we serve. Remember, only you can prevent wildfires.
Thanks, Jessica. Another way that fire prevention specialists keep fires from happening is that they get out there and talk to people. They talk to communities, host meetings, and teach kids in schools, sharing many of the tips that we've shared with you in this program. Communication is key. In fact, the Smokey Bear ad campaign has been extremely successful ever since it started back in 1944. The Cooperative Forest Fire Prevention Program, or CFFP, along with the Association of State Foresters and the Ad Council. Now, these three agencies use all kinds of messaging, social media, and advertising campaigns to continue to spread the message that only you can prevent wildfires. So, if you're a student with an interest in something like advertising or communications, this could still be a career that might interest you. I mean, really, there are tons of ways of doing the things that you're already interested in, and you can do them to benefit the lands that we all love. So, Beth, Mary, and Kara, we have fire physicists, fire ecologists, fire prevention technicians, and fire prevention communicators. Are there any other careers available in wildfire prevention?
Oh, there are lots, MChat. Like Jessica, you can work in fire prevention at a lot of different levels, right? Specialists who do local education and implementation plans. And then once things get riskier, those same folks can build in larger teams that come tackle a really big challenge around a community or multiple communities. They reduce those unwanted human-caused fire ignitions through prevention and education. You could also come join with us and be fire scientists. We study all of these different environmental conditions. We could study fire behavior, how the fire moves around, the effects of the fire. These can all also can predict the potential for wildfire and offer options before, during, and after wildfires and prescribed fires. So those are some of the folks that I can think of. Beth, can you think of any more? What have I missed?
Well, actually, we've talked about the folks that work with the public. We talked about that a lot, and Jessica's one of those folks. And like MChat mentioned earlier, and we've talked about this in other events, other live events. We've got folks that can help suppress the fires after they do start. Our firefighters include people that work on the ground and tackle fire from the air as well. So MChat, you mentioned hotshot crews. Those are the elite firefighters that are right there in the most remote areas working on suppressing wildfires. We have firefighters that work with a fire engine. We have people that jump out of airplanes to fight fires. And as a matter of fact, Jessica mentioned that she fights fires when she's not out educating people about fires. And, I work with a lot of those folks all the time, teaching them about the fire ecology of the area. And so when you work for the Forest Service, you actually, regardless of what your title is, you can do a lot of all of these different jobs because all of them are so important. So one day you might be out talking to the public. The next day, you might be suppressing a wildfire. Another day, you might be working on a prescribed fire. So we work with the bad fire and we work with the good fire to prevent the likelihood of a wildfire. So like Jessica said, every day is different, and I encourage all of you to think about working for the Forest Service.
This is also interesting. Quick fun fact, Beth. When I was learning how to build trails, one of my favorite instructors, she was a hotshot. She actually managed a hotshot crew. Her name was Bethany. So for the folks at home, you don't have to be named Beth or Bethany to be in these careers, but it doesn't seem to hurt. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. So in all seriousness, it's not just the Forest Service, but actually a whole bunch of different agencies that work together to help prevent wildland fires. Now, if you want to dive into this a little bit further, I really highly recommend you check out the Natural Enquirer Scientist Cards. The Scientist Cards tell you all kinds of information about scientists and engineers, what they do, how they got started, and their favorite thing about their job. So be sure to check them out on the Natural Enquirer website. Now, maybe you're a few years away from being a professional wildland fire prevention specialist, but there are still ways that you can help right now. You can always become a junior forest ranger. The Junior Forest Ranger program uses the USDA Forest Service guidelines and studies to encourage kids just like you, usually age 7 to 13, to have fun and to love the outdoors. It also teaches kids how to help maintain the natural world. So you can sign up right on the Forest Service website.